Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of Organic Matters, the podcast brought to you by the Irish Organic Association. And it is sweltering hot at the minute and I'm sheltering in a shed on the farm of Trevor Harris here in Kildare, and I've dragged Trevor off the combine. He's been busy but he's acquiesced anyway. So Trevor, thank you very much for that. Give us a sense of the lay of the land here. You know, it's beautiful Kildare countryside. How much of it are you farming and what are you farming here?
So we're farming around 140 acres, and we farm a mixed farm, so we've loads of different things going on. At the moment we're at the tillage, so we've a tillage enterprise comprising of growing oats for ploughing. We grow barley for Waterford Distillery, and we grow what we call a polycrop then for a dairy farmer down in Galway. And then we have besides that we have a suckler cow to beef system on the go, and we have sheep as well, so producing spring lambs. And then we've more recently gotten into horticulture along with another local chap, and we're doing salad leaf into a chain of 6 restaurants in Dublin and Kildare, and we're producing baby leaf spinach, baby leaf mustard, kale, and cos lettuce.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of irons in the fire. I'm going to concentrate on one thing at the minute, because in the distance there is absolutely golden oats, I imagine, that you're harvesting at the minute. So what variety are you harvesting, and can you tell us a bit about the process, because there's lots of interest now in kind of growing crops?
So yeah, you're right that we're harvesting oats at the moment. It's beautiful sunny weather that we're harvesting it in, which is not necessarily normal for August. Like in the past, we found August can be quite wet, and we're possibly a little earlier this year than we normally would be. So the variety we're harvesting is husky, and we've been growing husky for a good number of years, and found it reasonably successful for us, both in yield and in quality. It's a variety that they like down in Flahavens, and it's good to grow varieties that they like. And the reason they like is because the grain quality is good, so they get a good yield out of it when they're making the porridge.
And when do you typically sow it?
So we'd normally sow it in the tail end of March, early April, and this crop was sown in the first week of April. Thinking about maybe going back we used to grow oats in the winter time, and thinking of possibly going back to some winter oats as well.
Any particular reason why?
Just it has a little bit longer in the ground, and if you got a real wet spring, it'd mean you wouldn't have to be struggling to get it into the ground. Because with oats in particular, with barley I wouldn't mind so much getting it into the ground late, but with oats you prefer to have it in early-ish in the spring anyway.
And in terms, I know there's a lot of discussion about kind of min-till and plough depth. I mean, how do you do your own ploughing, or do you set the plough at a certain level, or what are you doing when you are sowing those crops?
So I have a very, very strong opinion on tillage.
Share it, go on.
Okay. So I've tried all sorts of different things, and I know no-till has become very fashionable at the moment, but in an organic system with grass weeds, and I do have grass weeds to deal with, in the absence of glyphosate, it's an impossibility in my mind in Ireland. Maybe in other countries where they can grow cover crops and mulch them into the ground and use the frost to kill them and so on and so forth, it might be possible, but in Ireland with our temperate climate, I don't see it as a possibility. So I tried that, and I thought about it a lot as to what was the alternative that would be both kind to the soil and also workable in the sense that I'd be able to deal with the grass weeds and so on and so forth. So my solution is the phrase I've coined for myself is thoughtful tillage. So I don't think there's any machine that should be excluded from the field as long as you've thought through as to why you're going to use it and what way you're going to use it and what the consequences are going to be, both the intended consequences and the unintended consequences. So let's take the plough for example, which has been in the whole environmental thing has been given a bad rep recently.
And especially with earthworms, because there's all these studies being done about earthworms and how important they are for organic and soil in general in terms of potassium that they can release through their work in the soil. So plough is sometimes perceived as enemy number one when it comes to when it comes to them. But you're saying, so you're taking the plough into the field. So what do you do with it?
So let's get into the thought process, and this is where the thoughtful tillage comes from. So like I've said from the outset, I have issues with some grass weeds. So the reason I'm using the plough is to invert the soil to get on top of the grass weeds and give my crop a chance to establish before the grass weeds grow, and they are going to regrow in the absence of glyphosate. And that's not to say that I would have any desire to have glyphosate anywhere near my field, even if, whether I was let or not let. But so that's my intended consequence. Now, when I think about how I'm going to use it, like the unintended consequences is the degradation you're possibly causing for your soil microbiome. So what I do is I use the plough in a very particular way. I plough shallower, so I'm only working within sort of between 4 and 5 inches. So it's only the very top soil that I'm dealing with, and I'm leaving the soil beneath that alone. And my thought process is that the microbiome goes deeper than 5 inches. So whatever I disturb in the top will be repopulated by the soil biology from below after I've done it. I also watch what speed I'm doing in the tractor, and a lot of times guys will be doing 8-10 kilometers an hour in the tractor down the field just to get through the work, because they see a short period of time it's dry in the spring, let's say, and they feel like they have to get through the work. I'd be more for moving at sort of 4 kilometers an hour. And the difference in how the plough interacts with the soil when you're traveling at 4 kilometers per hour in comparison to 8 kilometers per hour is night and day. You're not forcing the soil, you're easing it over, so you're actually not causing nearly as much harm to the soil microbiome, and at the same time you're actually introducing oxygen into the soil, which is really important for a healthy soil. Like the two of the most important nutrients that our soil needs is oxygen and water, and a lot of the time, especially with the soil that we have here, it's a non-expanding clay, and it tightens, so it doesn't have the oxygen in it. So actually by ploughing it, I'm actually helping the soil to have oxygen in it, which is a positive thing for the biology to repopulate that soil that I've just turned over.
And how have the results been for you with the kind of process, the thoughtful tillage process that you're using now? In terms of, say, yield, or in terms of, say, soil health, because I know you look at that quite regularly as well. Yeah,
I've seen huge changes in soil health, and I've seen it's much healthier now that I'm working with it this way. I'd see it's improved an awful lot, and in the past I was struggling to try and get it to improve, and even as I went through a process of trial and a bit of no-till, I actually saw the soil degrade, and my thinking on why it degraded was because it tightened and it wasn't getting this loosening affair, it wasn't getting the oxygen into it, so it was dying because I wasn't moving it. And the other thing that I'll do is I'll use a rotavator, which is definitely seen as the ultimate no-no when it comes to looking after your soil health. So when I'm moving through the rotation, and I come from the grassland end of the rotation into the cereal end of the rotation, the first thing I do is preferably about 6 weeks before I go to plough, but depending on the way the soil is, it could be 2 weeks before I go to plough, I'll rotivate the top 2 inches in order to start that breakdown of the grass lay on the surface in the aerobic layer, rather than going through it with the plough and turning it down and putting it into the anaerobic layer where it turns into this putrid mess. So I'll break it up on the surface, and I might run through it with the rotavator twice. But when I say I'm rotivating, and I'm only rotivating 1.5 to 2 inches, and the rotor on the rotavator is going very slow, and the forward speed of the tractor is reasonably slow as well. So you're actually not, you're just sort of scratching the surface a little bit. And again, you're only dealing with the top 1.5 to 2 inches of the soil. So you have your healthy soil all below that to repopulate and to get up into it and get it to break down. So that combined with the way I'm ploughing has improved, that's improved the 12 inches of the topsoil for me. When I dig holes, I'll notice the difference in it, and as well as that, what I make sure is that the soil is in fit condition to be worked. So I think about how the soil is before I go out into the field with the machine. I don't go, it's April, the sun is shining, all my neighbours are out ploughing, you know, I can't be sitting in here. I look at the field, and if the soil is wet, I don't go out. It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. It doesn't matter what way the weather is. If the soil isn't ready, I won't touch it. And this spring in particular, I had 2 fields to sow for barley. And one field, I worked and I ploughed and I sowed, and I hadn't started ploughing the second one for, I'd say, a week and a half, 2 weeks later, and it was because it wasn't ready. So it got sown a week and a half after the first field, and it was just, one was ready, the other one wasn't, so I left it alone. And what I find is, if you work soil when it's too wet, you're dealing with something that's much heavier, so you're going to do an awful lot more damage, and it's just that simple.
So that's the cereal and harvest side of the business, but there is a horticulture side that you mentioned, and I'm just wondering why you got into it.
Okay, so
that's a blunt way of putting it. Why'd you do it? Yeah.
So there was a number of things sort of came together all at the one time, and that's how I ended up in horticulture. Like I've always been a tillage farmer, and I was struggling with the soil and with the soil health. So I went off and I did a lot of studying, a lot of reading books, and going to lectures and things like that. And then I spent a decent bit of time putting what I'd learned into practice to try and improve the soil. And I saw improvements in the soil, and what I wanted to do was to take advantage of those improvements in the soil, and I saw horticulture as a good opportunity, as something good to get into. So I went off and I studied horticulture, and at the same time I had the good fortune to meet someone who'd recently moved into the area, and he was also interested in horticulture and interested in getting involved in it. So he just bought a bit of land in the area, but his background was more business. So he sort of, the two of us got introduced to each other because he was told that he wanted to do organic farming, and he was told I'd be good to talk to. Yeah. So we were chatting anyway, and this is where the whole horticulture business started. So he had the connections, and I had the organic knowledge, and his connections linked into this chain of 6 restaurants, Sprout Food Co. They specialise in fast salads. So
yeah, I'd say a lot of people will be familiar with them, and they'll be wondering where they get their leafy greens from. So their leafy greens come from you, essentially.
This is it, yeah. So basically, as a side business, myself and Gar run Sprout Farm, and Sprout Farm rents some ground off me. We run the farm on the farm here, you know, so it's within the farm gates.
How many acres is dedicated to horticulture, and is it a year-round operation? Do you have to have crops continually coming on?
So it's a year-round. We have about 6 acres dedicated to it at the moment, and we mainly focus on the summer, but we do grow kale throughout the winter. So basically what we do is we provide them with baby leaf spinach and baby leaf mustard and cause from late spring till the autumn, and then we have kale from more or less 12 months of the year. So they were really excited. Like they're in Sprout Food, their focus is on quality. Like there's other restaurants that will do the healthy options of salad, but with Sprout they're very very particular about it being quality solid as well, which sort of rings true with me. I've said over the years, and some people will have heard me say this, that I don't see it as good enough for something just to be organic. If it's organic and you're expecting someone to pay a little bit more for it, the quality needs to be there as well. It needs to be of good quality. And when I met with the team in Sprout, that sort of fit in well, because they were of the same mindset, you know, that they wanted to provide healthy eating experience for someone, but they wanted it to have a good quality leaf in it. So it's a good marriage between us, you know. And what I found works really well is because they're so interested in quality and because they're so interested in organic, you know, they when we have hiccups with bugs or with weeds or things like this, you know, they'll understand it. They don't just throw us out the door and go, yeah, well, we can get better stuff that doesn't have bugs or weeds in it from the guy who's using chemicals, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, it does sound like your stuff is really good as well, but that kind of thing about bugs and weeds and fertilizer as well, there's going to be a lot of people kind of interested in horticulture. How do you manage the bugs and the weeds and the fertilizer? Maybe the bugs and the weeds first. How do you manage them?
So first of all, the thing that I always say about bugs and weeds is the problem that you can see is an awful lot better than the problem that you can't see. With pesticides and pesticide residues, it's an issue you can't see. With if there's an insect sitting on your salad leaf, you can just pick that salad leaf up and fling it away. Or if there happens to be a weed in it, you can pick that up and throw it away. Now, neither the bug nor the weed will probably harm you if you eat them, but, like, you know, you have the option of throwing them away.
But you don't have your children out picking slugs off less leaves late at night, do you?
No, but I do have them out picking weeds.
I mean, it's a foreign tradition, isn't it? It's kind of, yeah, of course it is, yeah.
So, like, realistically, you know, with our baby leaf, we do a certain amount of things to produce a nice even bed that has very little weeds in it, but it always have a number of weeds. And before we harvest every single morning, the first thing we do is we spend possibly an hour just hand picking weeds off the bed. Okay,
so that's just the truth of the matter. And fertilizer, in terms of fertilizing those crops, what do you do?
So it totally depends on the field that we're in. So like, we'd have a suite of different things that we can use. Like, we'd use a bit of Peyton Cayley, we'd use a bit of elemental sulfur, we'd use there's ones off the shelf which I use from as well, is there's pelletized chicken manure, or there's a pelletized vegetable option as well. So we're using them, but I'm basically trying to move away from the broad spectrum ones and into more specific ones. And then the other thing I'd use is I'd have a well-made biodynamic compost is sort of the central nutrient for the soil.
Is that a liquid one that you can use in a spray, or what is it?
No, it's our own homemade compost. So basically, it's the straw manure taken out of the shed that the cattle were in for the winter, and we'll compost it down over the summer. We'll add in the biodynamic preparations, and we'll process it. We'll possibly we'd add soil. We'll add a bit of sand, possibly basalt dust. Then we might add a bit of sulfur, a bit of soft rock phosphate, and things like this to activate it, you know. And then we'll turn it about 4 times, and it makes this lovely rich compost, and that'll go on a lot of the farm every year.
How many tons of that would you have?
It'd be small enough, like, we'd be dealing in the 150, 200 tons, like, you know.
And I'm guessing it would probably depend what was going in the field, how many tons per acre it would get as well, would it?
Yeah, well, we'd be in the region of sort of 1.5 tons to the acre, which for compost on an organic farm going on to broad acre crops is small, but
It's really strong.
It's real strong, yeah, and rich compost that we're using, yeah.
I'm wondering as well, and you mentioned cattle there, and you wrote a very interesting piece in the Organic Matters magazine about grazing. For anyone who didn't read it, I mean, no one did not read it, but for anyone who might not have read it thoroughly, what were you talking about in there in regards to grazing?
So I was discussing holistic grazing management and my experiences of it. It was one of the courses that I've done over the recent years, and I suppose what I was getting at is how I manage the animals throughout the summer, through the grazing season. And basically what we do is we've 31 paddocks, and we move them around those 31 paddocks throughout the summer. Now, sometimes they'll be on them for 1 day, sometimes they'll be on them for 2 days, and this basically affects how with the holistic grazing, the focus is more on when they're not on the paddock than when they are. So how long your rest period is, so how long before the next time the animals come back to it. So if they're on each paddock a day, then it's 30 days before they come back. If they're on each paddock 2 days, it's 60 days before they come back, and that can have a very big effect on the plants that are within the paddock. So we
give people an idea as well, because people are used to seeing or used to hearing about grazing, quite short grass down to even kind of shorter levels. So how high would the grass be when you're letting the cattle into it? Does it matter?
Generally, it's well above your knee. It's probably above your waist.
And do you strip graze any of that, or do you just give them, say, a full maybe 4 acres in one go or something like that?
Yeah, all 31 paddocks are exactly the same size. So it's very uniform.
Okay,
yeah. Well, they're not exactly, like there could be a few hundred square meters one way or the other, but within reason. So I've divided up the fields. So
what size are the fields?
It takes a little bit of sitting down and thinking it through and working it out. But basically, the way the farm works is that the whole farm goes through the rotation, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 fields. And what
is the size of the fields, just to give people an idea?
They're anything from sort of 5 to 10 acres to 15 acres to 20 acres. So in that sort of region. So obviously a 20 acre field will have more divisions than a 15 or a 5 acre field.
Okay.
Yeah.
And typically, what space are the cattle going into at a time? Are they going to 1 acre at a time or 2 acres?
It's a little over an acre.
A little over an acre at a time.
At a time, yeah. So the idea then is, so we're focused on the rest period, so be it 30 days or 60 days, and what we want is for the plants to get to express themselves in the way that they're designed to express themselves, not just keeping them in the forage stage. We want to let some of them go to seed so that they replenish those plants in the ground, but also to let them go through the flowering stage. So we're helping with the biodiversity, helping with the insects as well. And the idea of letting it grow tall is that when the grass gets tall, and we've a mixture of herbs, like we've in the latest one I sowed, we've 6 different clovers, we've 5 different grasses, and I think we've 4 different herbs within it. So there's a lot of diversity in it, and if you leave in practice, if you leave the animals on that, if you put them on a broad area, like if I had my 10 acre field and I just let them in there for a week or more, they'd select certain plants and they just keep eating them until they disappear. So when I'm only leaving them in there for the day or for 2 days, that means that by the time the plant is regrown, they're gone on to the next paddock. So they don't come back for a second bite of it, and the plant gets to rejuvenate. And when you start off with the grass a little bit taller, what's above the ground matches what's below the ground. So the roots will be much longer. So they're actually affecting the soil an awful lot more because they're much longer. Now, if you graze that right down really, really tight, you've taken all the power out of the surface. So now the roots that are below don't have an energy source coming from the surface to feed themselves. So all of a sudden, a whole heap of roots die off. So we're trying to avoid that by not grazing it tight. So when we go onto the paddock, the grass is tall, and when we come off the paddock, it's not clean as the standards farming model would see it. It doesn't look like a lawn. It looks nothing like a lawn at all. It looks like a mess.
Is there ragwort? Is that what you're trying to do?
No, there's no ragwort. No, we've no problem with ragwort. The reason we got sheep onto this farm 30, 40 years ago. When was it? It was the guts of 40 years ago. We got sheep on the farm was because I was fed up pulling ragwort, and I said to my father, "Go and get some sheep, because this can't continue." And he went and got some sheep.
What are your children going to say to you when they get fed up with picking weeds? Anyway, well, you got the sheep anyway.
We got the sheep, and the sheep solved the ragwort problem. We don't have it, and I graze the cattle and sheep together. So basically, when I say the animals are moving through these 31 blocks, the sheep and the cattle are all in the one lot together, and all the cattle of various different ages are all together, because life's too short as far as I'm concerned, and this is where I've been at for the last 10 or 15 years, is everything grazes together. I go to one spot, I look at all the animals, make sure everyone's all right, and I head off and go about the rest of my day. I'm not wandering around 4 or 5 different lots of animals to check them. They're in one lot, I sort them out, and then it suits the grazing pattern as well, in the sense that I only have to manage one grazing block at a time. So our focus is on the soil and on improving the soil, and our focus is also on the animals being healthy, and with the healthy animals you'll get to thrive. So by having the diversity in the sward, they have all sorts of different plants that they can eat. They also have access to hedges, and they can browse in the hedges as well. So with animals, like they're an awful lot more in tune with their mineral needs than we are. And if they need a particular mineral, they'll go after a particular plant. And I did have an issue, funny enough, in the past with lambs who were showing a selenium deficiency, and the one of the things that a dock plant apparently pulls out of the soil is selenium. And later in the season, I saw the lambs going to the dock plant and eating the seeds off the dock plant, and I reckon they were after the selenium to rectify their own deficiency. And I didn't remedy the selenium deficiency in them. I didn't give them any selenium. So it's a dangerous thing to be given apart from anything else, but I didn't give them any selenium, and the problem went away, and I reckon they rectified it themselves. So this is why we have the diversity above ground, but below ground, having the bigger root ball and all the different types of plants put diversity into the soil root wise, and each different plant will have a different action on the soil and work with different microbes. So then when we finish with the forage end of the rotation, and we're moving into the cereal or horticulture end of it, you've got this really rich and vibrant soil that you're going to use to grow your crops, and it works.
Yeah, that's it. I could talk to you all day, but I know you actually have stuff to do. So I better let you go. But Trevor, thank you very much. And if anyone's interested, I know there's bits and pieces about you online between farming and nature, and also if anyone has the Organic Matters magazine, they could look back at your article as well, because it is very interesting and I do recommend it. But for everyone listening, you've been listening to the Organic Matters podcast, brought to you by the Irish Organic Association. And for more information, you can subscribe to the podcast or visit www.irishorganicassociation.ie.